Pretoria. Firstly, I think the significance of presenting our annual audit outcomes for local government is today marked by our presentation here in Parliament. I was reminding the chair of our committee that we were here in 2016 when the Standing Committee on the Auditor General pronounced on what it intends to do at the time when we were reflecting on the audit outcomes of the PFMA. And I'm sure the chair, when he gets the opportunity, will elaborate further on what he said then. And I'm sure you will be delighted to know that some of the steps that were announced then are getting closer to fruition. Back to what we are here today for. As you know, we announced these audit outcomes for the annual financial statements a couple of months after we have finalized the reports. In this instance, the year that ended on June 2017 was the subject of the audit scrutiny up to the point when we reported on them through the financial statements and issuing the audit report at the end of November of 2017. So each one of the councils that we'll be reporting on, all 257 of them, would have received their audit reports already at the end of November 2017. And according to the legislation, they are all required to table those audit reports with their annual reports by no later than the 31st of January of 2018 in this case. You might want to know why we are now presenting this in May. For the period up to when we get these audit opinions issued, we go through an analysis to get to a point where we can release a consolidated set of audit outcomes reflecting on the performance of each of these municipalities as they were reported in their annual financial statements. So what we're going to be dealing with here is not necessarily the financial statements themselves, but what was gleaned from the financial statements as a common threads, common features, common issues that have come to occupy the minds of South Africans when it comes to the issue of financial management and the rigor associated with managing public finances. We've got a media release here together with a general report, the final copy that we are releasing today. And I had said to the team, maybe today we'll probably take a bit of a different angle. While we go through these outcomes, we'll also kind of do some kind of a masterclass through these outcomes so that the words that you see in this media release can be substantiated by some figures that are already in the general report. I'll do my best to give you references to the pages as I go through the different headings of what is in the media release. This is also an attempt to help you navigate through this general report. As we go through it, at least you will be noting which sections of the report do some of the paragraphs in the media release relate to. Maybe as I start, I'll cover a couple of paragraphs in the media release just to highlight some of the few issues. If I look at the second paragraph, and I think this is where the real essence of this MFMA 2016-2017 is about, where we say, it is now 5 years later and we are still faced with the same accountability and governance challenges. There has been no significant positive change towards credible results. Instead, we are witnessing a reversal in audit outcomes. What we are saying here is laid out very clearly from page 4 to page 7. If you look at page 5 rather to page 7, what we've done is we've taken stock of what we reported in 2011, 2012. That was about 5 years ago's audit outcomes. And these are some of the headlines that we picked up on those specific dates in 2013 when the 2011-2012 audit outcomes were reported. We reproduced these headings, especially the ones on page 5, just to take you back 5 years ago in respect of what was said when former Auditor General Terence Nombembe announced these audit outcomes at the penultimate term end. And if you look at page 6 and 7, we just reproduced, following on the release of those 2011-2012 outcomes, a opinion piece that was produced in the Business Day, trying to articulate in most simple terms what it means to have the kind of audit outcomes that we had in 2011-2012. We thought that it will make for some very interesting reading when people look at this with the 2018 spectacles now and start navigating through the issues that are raised by this opinion maker after he read, a week after the audit outcomes in 2011-2012 were released. So we thought, let's go back down memory lane so that we can begin to see that what we are saying in that statement, where we say there's been no positive significant change, is a reality that is not something that we are painting here, but was planted way back then. We go on to say that although there are municipalities in some provinces that are diligently working hard to attain and maintain the desirable audit outcomes through an entrenched culture of accountability and decisive leadership, these outcomes and efforts are overshadowed by the many elements of regression in the local government audit outcomes. I would like to refer you to page 13 as an example in respect of that statement, as well as page 26. Those 2 pages give us a sense in the map of South Africa as you see it on page 13 as to the provinces that have achieved clean audits, at least as we speak now, in 2016-2017, and those being municipalities that we signed off as unqualified with no significant findings, either in compliance with legislation or in reporting accurately and clearly on the outcomes of their performance. You'll see their green annotation in respect of each of these provinces reflects the number of municipalities in that province. So each flag is a province. So what's on page 13 is a depiction of those that have achieved clean audits by province. And if you cast your mind straight to page 26, you will see the split in respect of the different types of audit outcomes down to each province. And that's what we are referring to in that paragraph when we say that some of the municipalities that have held strong in respect of managing their finances diligently have, however, been disappointed by a number of reversals that have resulted from their management of the finances in the last year. While we are on page 26, just to look at the legend on the right-hand side of this report, what it tells us in each of these provinces is the number of municipalities that have either achieved an audit outcome that is unqualified with no findings, being the green ones, while the ones that are yellow are the ones that are unqualified but have not passed the test with regards to compliance with legislation, as well as reporting accurately on their performance. Again, the legend indicates also at the bottom that the ones that are purple are the ones where the audit office has found a number of areas where they were not doing what was expected of them in respect of accounting. Hence, we qualified them in respect of their financial statements, which also comes with non-compliance in certain areas with legislation, as well as accurate reporting on their performance. You'll also see as we go through the presentation, the red ones are starting to shrink, which, in accordance with the statistics that we've provided, is also in line with the targets that were set in the medium-term strategic framework. Overall, if you look at the summary of the audit outcomes, just at the top of page 26, where we compare 2015 to 2016 versus 2016 and 2017, right at the top left corner of page 26. you could see the movement where we were last year in respect of almost 241 of the municipalities. These were the outcomes that were achieved in number of municipalities. What we are referring to as a regression, for example, the green ones, which is the clean audits, were 48 in the previous period and have now reduced to 33. And so it goes with the rest of the other audit outcomes as shown on that page. So that page will give you an overall summary of the audit outcomes in respect of each of those municipalities. While we are on page 26, you can see that the advice, according to what's on page 2 of the media statement, the advice that was given by the audit office clearly was not followed in respect of addressing those matters. And we believe that clear attention needs to be given to the issues that are continuing to contribute to the lousy audit outcomes, as it were, that we have come to see in local government in the most recent years. On page 3 of the media release, there we are again looking also at page 26 of the general report. That's where we are reporting about the total of 256 municipalities, as well as 21 municipal entities. And the number of municipalities, as we know, with the consolidation of a lot of these across the provinces, decreased from 278 to 257. And that's just the statistics in respect of those municipalities. And I've already said that the key issues that have contributed, if you look at page 27 and page 28 of the general report, was largely the regression in submission of financial statements. And I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that the production of credible financial statements as a start is the primary responsibility of financial managers and CFOs, because their job is to account for the transactions that are taking place, some of which require certain documentation to be provided in order for them to get a better chance of producing credible financial statements. In this instance, we are noting the fact that there were quite a number of them that were not able to produce these financial statements at first instance as credible set of accounts, in the sense that we had to point to them certain areas of material misstatements and errors that were contained in the initial set of financial statements before any of them could get a chance of getting financial statements that were unqualified. Moving to page 29 again of this report, where we draw attention to the area of compliance with legislation. As we can see, the non-compliance by about 78% of these municipalities, accounting for a total of about 186, can potentially lead to financial loss. And that's what we say on page 29, and we identify the areas that they did not comply with. As you know, in the past we've reported the fact that the management of procurement and contract management has been the significant area of failure when it comes to compliance with prescribed legislation. The area of prevention of unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure has also been another area that has preoccupied the reports of the Audit Office over the last number of years, as well as the glaring lack of consequences that were often absent when people had done wrong or have done incorrect things as they account for municipal finances. We have often seen that there has been little of consequence in respect of dealing with those people that transgressed laws and regulations in financial management. We break down this report further to indicate that among other areas of non-compliance is a significant area around expenditure management, the disciplines in place that are expected to be observed in order to manage expenditure. That also deals, I'm on page 29, it also deals with creditors that are not being paid within the prescribed number of days, as well as issues of managing the assets of the institution where proper and effective systems of internal control on asset management are not observed. And these assets, we know, when the expenditures are made, are aimed at procurement of assets that are likely or are going to be used for the delivery of services of various kind. Some of these we will speak to in this media release, because we also look at what are these assets that are being produced, how are they being cared for, are they being maintained, are they being effectively managed in order to ensure that they produce the goods and services that they were procured for. We've also paid attention, among others, to the area of human resource management in this report, where we look at the levels of vacancies in certain key positions, particularly those of municipal manager, the CFO, as well as the heads of supply chain management. Another big issue, again, which we reflect on in this report is the area of revenue management, where again in 2016-2017 we still see certain municipalities not being able to account for the revenue that they generate adequately. Let us have a look quickly on page 32, where we deal with the area of irregular expenditure. And I'm now on page 4 of this media release, but we are articulating the detail pertaining to that irregular expenditure on page 32. The page that's headed Unauthorized, Irregular, Fruitless and Wasteful Expenditure. You will note in our report that we say irregular expenditure has grown from 16.2 billion in the previous year to 28.3 billion in the current year under review. And I'm going to pause there quickly and ask you to have a look at what page 32 says about this 28.3 billion. This 28.3 billion, if you look at the line that says irregular non-compliance with legislation, it came in total in 2016-2017 as a conglomerate figure of all the 257 municipalities we audit at an amount of 28.37 billion, represented by about 215 municipalities, growing from where it was in 2015-16 at 16.2. Now, the question is, the bulk of this increase, this is the point I'd like to clarify, the bulk of this increase, to the extent of about 15.026 billion, was expenditure in previous years only uncovered and disclosed in 2016-2017. So what it means is that the irregular expenditure in 2016-2017 did not grow by that quantum in that year. The municipalities, because they are required to investigate instances of irregular expenditure. We've often said in our report, this irregular expenditure as reported is likely to be incomplete. So what they've done is then they've gone back to contracts related to expenditures incurred in previous periods and only identified and reported on it as required by the MFMA in the year 2016-2017. Meaning, if you look again in that same block where we say, is all of it 2016-2017 expenditure, we are saying at the bottom only about 4.5 billion of expenditure in respect of irregular expenditure is for transactions of 2016-2017. So I think it's important to look at that growth so that we don't say we've now had an additional 12 billion in 1 year. The additional expenditure for irregular expenditure is about 4.5 because some of it is expenditure incurred in previous years, only identified and reported on in 2016-2017. What does it mean? It means that the efforts that are being put into the system by municipal managers and CFOs are increasing the level of detection of irregular expenditure. Because in some instances, they don't go through the whole exercise in identifying this expenditure, but pick it up in years subsequent to when the money was spent. So that is what accounts for that extent and level of irregular expenditure. And I think if you want to see how we unpack all of this irregular expenditure in detail, as well as some of the instances to which it relates, as well as some of the provinces that were affected by this irregular expenditure, you will see we've basically identified the top 10 contributors to this irregular expenditure, whether or not it was incurred in 2016-2017, but we have taken the full quantum of the amount. You will see on page 34 of the report that the Eastern Cape leads the pack with regards to the total extent of irregular expenditure incurred by municipalities in that province. It accounts for about 13.5 billion of the total, followed by the Northwest, then Gauteng, and so it goes with the rest of the other provinces. And if you look at also the same irregular expenditure, if you look at which municipalities were the main contributors, regardless of which province they came from, is what is set out on page 36. Nelson Mandela Bay Metro has that amount as reflected there of 8.1 billion, followed by OR Tambo District, followed by City of Tshwane, and so it goes for the rest of them over the page, the top 10 contributors to this total of irregular expenditure. So the long and short of it, if one looks at what does this thing mean, what it means is that there are many instances of procurement activity and expenditure management that falls foul of the rules of transparency and competitiveness as far as municipalities perform their activities. Because of the limitations of an audit is not able to get to the bottom of the reasons why that particular expenditure was incurred the way it was. It only comes to light when a specific investigation is initiated to ensure that we can get to the bottom of what is behind it. Is it a mere ignoring of regulations? Is it to do with people not competently executing their jobs? Or is there ill intent behind it? And that is the answer that can only be given after a specific investigation has been conducted towards addressing that irregular expenditure. On page 5 of this release, we look at what we say here on page 39 of the report. We are talking here on page 5 about the failure to investigate findings. And we are analyzing that on page 39 of this report, where we look at what councils have dealt with in respect of the unauthorized, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. And you can see, in essence, if you look at the top line where councils were dealing with the 15-16 issues of UIFW, which is unauthorized, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful, that's what that abbreviation is about, there's hardly anything that was recovered. But the bulk of it, the red, is what councils have not yet dealt with by the time we release this report. And cumulatively, if you look at the whole issue of irregular expenditure cumulatively, taking into account that which was incurred in previous years, it still is a significant amount that has not been dealt with by councils. And the amount that has been addressed to date is just about a fraction, if you think about what 1 million represents in relation to 30 or 43 billion in total. I think also one of the things that we point out to on page 6 of the media release is also drawing attention to an increasingly difficult environment that the auditors are finding in respect of the audits that we do. I'm sure the media will remember towards the end of last year we did highlight our frustration in respect of this particular matter. And in the latest period, we've had many staff members citing instances where they were confronted by intimidatory and hostile environments, especially where they were shining the light in certain instances on areas that were not looked at before. So we believe that there is a scope for anybody who has a challenge with what the auditors are reporting. However, we only accept it if there are sufficient grounds for the contestation. In this instance, we just want to highlight the fact that that matter has not gone away. We still are finding our auditors being put under sometimes unnecessary pressure without due consideration to the fact that auditors are supposed to do this work independently. On page 41 of the general report, and looking at page 7, where we speak about the financial health of municipalities, We are saying here the inability to collect debt from municipality consumers was widespread among a number of the municipalities. And I think it's a reflection of the sentiments that we have picked up both in the most recent budget votes as well as of yesterday when the minister spoke to some of the challenges in financial management in local government. And I think it is inevitable that these municipalities, for as long as they are not able to collect the debt owing to them, will find it difficult to balance their books. In total, about 31% of the municipalities disclosed a deficit, meaning that the expenditures that they had incurred, and I'm looking at page 41 now with all the movements that you are referring to here, where we say about 31% of the municipalities disclosed a deficit. These are instances where the revenue that they were able to generate overall suddenly got exceeded by the expenditures that were associated with the revenue that was generated. This puts a strain on their ability to continue to spend on the things that they need to spend on for as long as the revenues they ought to generate slip away from them. We also highlight the fact under the financial health of municipalities that the financial woes of local government also weighed heavily on municipal creditors. The impact of this inability to pay creditors was most evident in the huge sums owed for the provision of electricity and water to ESCOM and the water boards, respectively. I think there was a significant exposure of this matter when ESCOM and the respective people from SALGA as well as National Treasury were speaking about this matter in respect of monies owing to water boards and ESCOM. The financial statements that we have signed bear evidence to the significant amounts over periods of time that have not been paid to these primary suppliers, especially that they are at the coalface of the things that most of these municipalities deliver, which is water and electricity. We've set these out clearly in the financial statements, and I think for an appreciation by municipality of how this plays itself out, I would refer you to look at the respective financial statements to scrutinize exactly which municipalities owe which of these utility companies how much over what period of time. Another point that we are highlighting again in these audit outcomes, on page 41, we are drawing attention there at the top right hand to vulnerable financial position of municipalities, where we say about 31% of the municipalities, which represent about 73 of them, disclosed in their financial statements that they may not be able to continue operating. Although they have to continue operating, they were reporting that they were in a particular vulnerable financial position at the end of the financial year. That was June of 2017. Meaning that when they look at their finances and they analyze the financial commitments that they have, as well as those that they are still to make, they find that they are either not going to be able to have the necessary cash resources to continue to pay for the things that they ought to pay for. And that's why we want to draw attention to that issue, to say the list that was produced by Treasury or by COCTA in respect of the vulnerable municipalities is consistent with the same municipalities that we have examined from an audit point of view, which means that the level of vulnerability was not exaggerated. It is consistent with what we have also found, barring the fact that the numbers may not be the same, but we just cross-checked in a number of these provinces, and we found that there is sufficient evidence to suggest that those vulnerable municipalities were also thrown out through the audit. I think it is important also to look at page 41 at the bottom in respect of the Provincial Overview, just to get an understanding of which among these provinces have got the significant majority of municipalities that are in this vulnerable position. You will see, for example, the Free State. This is now the Provincial Overview and the overall assessment of vulnerability. If you look at them just at the bottom of page 41 on the left-hand side, Free State leads the pack, followed by the Northwest, followed by the Northern Cape. These are the three provinces that have the majority of municipalities who have demonstrated a significant level of vulnerability. For example, if you just pay attention to the Free State box there, where we say overall assessment of vulnerability in the Free State, where there were good indicators found, there was no municipality in this province that we found to have good indicators of strong financial management and financial health. Neither did we find those that were of concern, meaning that they were either here or there. However, we found all 18 of them requiring intervention in order to stop the bleeding. As far as the Northwest, if you look at the next one, is about 59% of them. About 13 municipalities in that province are in a specific serious financial difficulty, and followed by the 56% of the Northern Cape. So if you look at all 9 provinces in respect of the number of municipalities, you will find most of them in these 3 provinces. And I think if you cast your mind to the list that would have been drawn up by COGTA, you will find most of the municipalities in those 3 provinces. Let me quickly step down to page 38 and just look at quickly this area of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. I think all I need to say insofar as this one is concerned, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, it is basically expenditure incurred where real opportunity not to incur it was not taken advantage of. This is where we pay interest unnecessarily, we pay penalties unnecessarily, because we do not assign people to make sure that whatever obligations we have are met and carried out on due dates. As we know, in major contracts, if you don't do it, you then pay something. Now that is expenditure incurred in vain because you've got nothing for it. All you do, you pay because you didn't pay attention to the fact that you must submit a VAT return or you must pay a particular creditor because there are terms. If people bring their equipment on site to come and do a road or water infrastructure, every day they wait for a decision to be made. They normally impose penalties for those kind of things. So that is really what we are looking at, and you can see the numbers are not big, but if this is left unattended, it is potentially about 1.5 billion of expenditure that could have been used for various other activities. Somewhere else on page 42 to page 44 of this general report, we there speak about the shortcomings in the development and maintenance of infrastructure. What we do every year, we pick up different areas of infrastructure management and infrastructure expenditure as managed by the different municipalities and test it in respect of compliance with very many prescripts that come with it. You will know that some of them come via conditional grants as well as other grants that are the likes of your municipal infrastructure grant, public transport network grant, as well as the urban settlement development grant. These are the grants that we have examined through this audit, as well as what has been reported on in this general report. The information pertaining to our assessment of all of these grants, right down to the provision of road infrastructure on page 42, as well as the provision of water and sanitation, and lastly, the maintenance of water infrastructure, as well as the extent of water losses as articulated in page 44 of the release. So there's sufficient information that we have shared here just to give a sense of what our assessment of the findings has been in a number of these areas. Some of them, for example, the findings that we have made, especially if you look on page 42, targets not being achieved in respect of what had been committed, road reported achievements not reliable, as well as supply chain management findings associated with the delivery of infrastructure and its maintenance in a number of these municipalities. As far as the road infrastructure is concerned, we also highlight also through each of the provinces as to which provinces had major findings in respect of this, because once most of these project management disciplines are not in place, that's when we start seeing the escalating levels of fruitless and wasteful expenditure in a number of them. So that will be the detail with regards to each of our assessment of the project area. I'd like to perhaps look at page 10 now of this media release and say that As we are going through this report, alongside we are also dealing with the Committee on the Auditor General, and I'm sure the Chair will take the floor later, where we had, in 2016, agreed with the committee that there's going to be a process initiated in Parliament. And really, I think this particular amendment of the Public Audit Act is largely about addressing consequences, among other things, through an audit legislative instrument. That's effectively what that is about. And we are saying that when we raise the issue of consequences not being there, most people were asking us, so what are you going to do about it? And what I'm reporting now is that the process that will give rise to that capability for the audit office is nearing completion, having been commenced in 2017, and we hope through it will be another instrument that had not been in place that will assist in reinforcing many other initiatives that are taking place either in COGTA or in SALGA or in the National Treasury. But just for interest's sake, we've also highlighted in the yellow block under that paragraph instances that already exist where we are not able to activate this power to refer these for investigation. What could have been had this particular power been in place already? An example, for example, among others, is that in one particular audit where we identified certain issues pertaining to financial reporting as well as the employment of a consultant, there was no service level agreement, there were no regular contract extensions, and excessive rates paid, and a lack of monitoring of the work performed by the consultant. Despite the AG reporting on to the board that this contract was potentially fraudulent, the board did not take any action to investigate the matters raised. Now, the reason you are using this example, you are saying if a particular authorized body does not take the required action to deal with some of the matters that are findings in the audit, this particular power will enable the audit office then to step in and do it themselves so that we can get to the bottom of exactly who and how much and what consequence will attach to that particular situation. Now that's the bulk of the stuff I wanted to share in respect of what is in these audit outcomes, and maybe I will quickly move to page 13 and just draw attention to some highlights of each of the provinces. If you look at what is on page 52 to page 78 of the general report, we are giving an insight and an assessment of our overall conclusions in respect of each of the provinces. And the media release touches in more summary level. However, the general report, starting on page 52 with the Eastern Cape and ending up on page 78 with the Western Cape, is a detailed breakdown down to each province, where we have highlighted a couple of issues in respect of these audit outcomes. We've decided that to make comparisons with these provinces in some of these is quite a difficult exercise, because you have a province that has got a majority of clean audits, while alongside you also have a province that has got unqualified audits with findings in certain areas. And we just thought that it would be good if you look at the statistics as we have set out in the media release, just to assess for yourselves the kind of issues that we are picking up. Just while you are on page 13, if one looks at the Eastern Cape, for example, here in the Eastern Cape, we are giving a summary of opportunities that were lost in respect of the commitments that they had made over a period of time. While they had about 20% of clean audits in 2015, 2016, that has now gone down to the 5% that you see there. The quality of financial statements across this province, if one looks at all of the municipalities here, is about 62%. And as I said earlier on, its irregular expenditure, which was about 5.4 billion in 2015-16, has shot up to an irregular expenditure amount of 13.5. And that is the kind of summary that you will find with respect to the rest of the other 8 provinces as we look at how they have performed and how their own individual municipalities have performed. And lastly, perhaps as we finish this feedback on this general report, I think it is worth noting that at the back of this report, from page 80 onwards, to make it easy for those that are going to write and analyze the report, from page 80 to page 88, those 8 pages, we really set out the key issues that are pertinent to understanding the audit outcomes, as well as understanding the different types of audit results that we reach as an audit office. We also give an insight into how the audit process works, what we audit and how we audit it, as well as the scope of the different areas that we focus on in an audit. A detailed explanation of the meaning attached to terms like irregular expenditure, the likes of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, as well as what our understanding based on the legal instruments is of the likes of your conditional grants, how they should be handled, as well as the purpose for which these grants are audited. We've also given you an insight into exactly what we look for in the performance reports that are presented. We are not validating the fact or otherwise of the delivery of services, because we are not trained to deal with that. We examine the data and the information that gets reported in the financial statements to check whether it is not likely to mislead the user of the financial statements. We also take a look at the human resource element to assess its effectiveness, while going through the issue of the control effectiveness that we examine. And lastly, some of the issues that we also look at here is what is the role of each of the ones that are providing assurance. Right from the senior management on page 86, what are the senior managers expected to do in a particular municipality in order to deal with, prevent or avert the growth of these levels of negative audit outcomes. Municipal managers and municipal entity chief executive officers, the mayors, the internal audit units, the audit committees, the coordinating and monitoring departments that are not in the day-to-day institution of local government, but have got a coordinating role, whether they are provincial or national institutions. And lastly, the municipal councils, the municipal public accounts committees, as well as the portfolio committees on local government. So that when you look at that section of this report, which deals with our assessment of the key instruments that are meant to deal with these audit outcomes, at least you can have a context of what are they expected to do, what did we find as lacking in their pursuit of these particular disciplines. So that is the overall audit report and the issues attached, as well as the context and the background to them. But I thought perhaps let me just deal lastly with what is on page 46 of the general report. And on page 46, we reporting on the issue that has been in the public domain over time in respect of the use of consulting services, where insofar as the financial reporting discipline is concerned, the amount is more or less the same as what was spent last year, but still high, as it sits at about just about 0.7 of a billion. Am I right? Yes. 0.7 of a billion in total. And these are costs that are incurred by municipalities overall towards the assistance and the services that they get from private sector institutions that assist them with their financial management disciplines. However, one also needs to draw attention to the fact that the money spent on the one side is one, but on the other side, there are also issues of our assessment of effectiveness, which is what is on page 46 on the right-hand side, where even if you go out and get the services of a consultant, if your ability to manage records as well as to manage the instruments through which you are going to report are not effective, then the consultant is not going to help. If the management of the project that leads to the generation of adequate and reliable financial statements is not strong, then the consultant is not going to work. Some of the consultants themselves did not deliver what was intended, and I guess we can examine the reasons for it. The lack of records and documents, among others, is that. And in some instances, the appointment of consultants becomes a knee-jerk reaction upon learning that you are headed towards a disaster in an audit, and then you wake up thinking that the solution is going to be to go and appoint and procure the services of a consultant, and then you end up with a lousy audit outcome afterwards, having spent that much money. That's what page 46 is about. It's an assessment that is not improving and has been at this level over a significant period of time. Let me leave the media release of these audit outcomes at that and say that we once again have noted a lack of movement over a period of time as we have assessed this thing over the 5-year period, but also taken a step at a year-on-year comparison of these audit outcomes, and we want to leave it at that in terms of the detail to share with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, AG. Colleagues, we will now take responses from the AG's guests. We'll start with COGTA, Deputy Minister Andrew Snell. After him, Councillor Mtwaku, Honorable Nyambi, and Honorable Smith will close. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the Auditor General for your report. Just to convey apologies on behalf of Minister Zweli Mkhize, who is attending Cabinet. The Ministry of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs welcomes the audit improvements in some municipalities, and we express serious concerns regarding those who have regressed in light of the 2016-17 audit report released by the Auditor General today. We congratulate those 33 municipalities that have received unqualified audit opinions with no findings for the period 2016-17, and again express very, very serious concerns regarding the general regression in audit outcomes as announced by the Auditor General today. While the number remains very low, too low, COGTA does note from the Auditor General's report that a total of 145 or 56% of municipal audit outcomes are classified as unqualified. We do believe that this does represent a basis for national and provincial governments' ongoing support programs to improve financial management in municipalities. We're encouraged that with ongoing efforts to improve the municipal audit outcomes, there are municipalities who do get things right and do become examples for others to follow. We believe that the Auditor General's report is a very useful yardstick to gauge the general performance of municipalities, and it also corroborates COGTA's own assessment through our Back to Basics program that 1/3 of our municipalities are functioning well, 1/3 are getting many of the basics right, but experience serious challenges that they need to be supported in, and 1/3 of our municipalities are, quite frankly, dysfunctional. COGTA is striving to achieve the ideal municipality as one that contains the following ingredients. Firstly, to provide democratic and accountable government for local communities. Secondly, to be responsive to the needs of the local community. Thirdly, to ensure the provision of services to communities in a sustainable manner. Fourthly, to promote social and economic development. Fifth, to promote a safe and healthy environment. Sixth, to encourage the involvement of communities in matters of governance. Seventh, to facilitate a culture of public service and accountability amongst its staff. And lastly, to assign clear responsibilities to the municipal management and to ensure the coordination of administrative units and mechanisms. Given this constitutional and legislative mandate, the Auditor General report today indicates that there is an urgent need to intervene in distressed and dysfunctional municipalities as they have been confronted by a series of problems. Institutional capacity and widespread poverty have undermined the sustainability of local government, leading in some instances to a catastrophic breakdown in services. It's within this context that since joining COGTA in February of 2018, Minister Mkhize has set in motion various interventions through the Back to Basics program, which will contribute towards improvement of municipal audit outcomes. The Minister has engaged big business and black professionals to secure their support to distressed municipalities that often struggle with contract management and the inability to plan, deliver, and operate and maintain infrastructure which is dependent on the competence of municipal officials. In the immediate term, the Minister has announced that COGTA is to deploy district technical support teams who are experts that will be deployed to municipalities to focus on infrastructure planning, delivery and maintenance, financial management support, governance and administration issues. These teams will be supported by the Rapid Response Technical Team, which will be assisting the financially distressed municipalities to develop financial recovery plans in collaboration with National Treasury that ensure that they are able to access the financial management conditional grant offered by National Treasury to promote reforms in financial management and build capacity in those municipalities. We are currently engaged in multidisciplinary, multi-departmental visits to provinces as part of COGTA's process to refine the interventions that we will be implementing. I can just mention that the Minister has already visited the Eastern Cape, and those provinces that are next in line would be North West and the Free State. All of these efforts are geared at ensuring that municipalities have effective governance systems in place and that qualified and competent senior officials are there to manage municipal finances with accountability within the applicable policies. Since the constitution of the new councils after the municipal elections, the Ministry has worked closely with other government agencies such as the National Treasury, the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, the Auditor General, SALGA and provincial governments to induct the new councillors and support them in discharging their oversight responsibilities effectively. This commitment remains. Working with the National Treasury and SALGA, the following measures are being implemented in municipalities to improve financial management. Firstly, the strengthening of municipal oversight structures such as municipal public account committees and municipal public disciplinary boards of the 10 municipalities with the highest unauthorized, irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. The councillors serving in these structures have received training since November 2017. Secondly, the deployment of audit action plans for municipalities with adverse or disclaimer audit opinions to address the root causes of their audit findings. Progress has been noted since the engagement started in November 2017. Improving compliance with the supply chain management processes through the use of the central supplier database of the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer to prevent the awarding of municipal contracts to public servants as highlighted by the Auditor General's report. And fourth, management tools such as guides, circulars, financial capability maturity model, the financial norms and indicators, a guide and toolkit for municipal public account committees, standard operating procedures, etc. have been developed and are being implemented to address gaps in internal controls and financial management which promotes non-compliance with the Municipal Finance Management Act. COGTA will continue to provide the required support to all municipalities that are in distress to ensure that they deliver services as per their mandate. And we are equally prepared and to intervene in those dysfunctional municipalities where such support does not yield the desired results. Thank you.